Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome production sound mixer Stevie Haywood, who joins us to talk about their work on Steve and Anemone. Stevie will talk us through what it was like recording sound for the two different projects. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Stevie. Hi Stevie, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're here to basically to kind of do a double bill of films. So we have Anemone. It's going to be such a tongue twister, but it is Anemone. Oh my gosh.
Anemone.
Anemone. And Steve. So which is 100% so much easier to say. But I think as well, before we jump into the projects, you're technically my first production sound mixer. No, not technically, you are.
Okay.
So I would love to hear what a production sound mixer does so that we can let the audience know and get a better understanding of your job.
Oh, right. Okay. So essentially our job is to capture location dialogue, primarily dialogue, occasionally other bits and bobs too, but mostly focus on getting nice and clean dialogue and recording it as clearly and without any sort of adulteration, so that later in post-production they can do all kinds of wonderful magical things with it. But our job is really just to capture dialogue as clean and as true as possible and allow the actor to fully express themselves through their voices.
So I always think as like a production sound mixer is probably like one of the most nerve-wracking jobs, and also whoever has to hold the boom mic, because with the boom it's just they must have like incredible strength and like tenacity, because you're just holding it and not wanting to get into shot as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those jobs. It's not so much about strength actually. There's a lot of technique involved, and if you've got good technique, you don't need to be some kind of you don't need to be incredibly tall, and B, you don't need to be incredibly strong, which is why there are lots of fantastic female boom ops who are not terribly tall, and I am talking about you, Joe Vale, if you're listening. And yeah, so it's about technique, and then there's lots of other little things going on as well that they basically run the floor. So the boom op, or first assistant in this case, or key first assistant, would be my voice piece on the floor, my sort of front of house. So they're managing the floor on my behalf and checking that sound extraneous noise is mitigated where possible, keeping in touch with all the other departments and just making sure everything runs smoothly for me so I can get the best out of what is available to me. That's the first thing. And the second thing is nobody notices a first assistant when they're doing their job well, or even just, perfectly well. They only notice it when it goes wrong because the boom dips in or something like that. It's a bit like being a focus puller in that respect. You a first AS, a first assistant camera, they're only spotted when they make a mistake. No one ever says, "Wow, that was brilliantly in focus, well done." They just say, "Oh, there was a slight focus buzz there." So it's one of those jobs that you can only ever be criticized for and never praised for.
Yeah, which is a shame really, because it's like if something doesn't happen, if something doesn't go wrong, then you're fine. But then
Yeah,
I guess as soon as something does sort of go a bit wayward,
and
you're in trouble.
everyone can see, right? Absolutely every department who's got a monitor, who's watching, all the standbys from every department could all shout at the same time, "Boom's in!" It doesn't matter who they are, where they are in the structure. They everyone can see. So you make a mistake, or or let's say the camera move has not been anticipated or has changed and no one's informed the boom op, which happens regularly, or it's just kind of the general looseness of the shot. The actor doesn't quite make their mark. If something changes, and the boom just grazes the edge of shot, because they're supposed to be literally on the edge all the time anyway. So the chances are, if something changes slightly, there may just be a little tiny bit of boom in shot. And the magic is when they can always be in that wonderful zone of as close as is humanly possible, but never in shot.
Yeah. Again,
Not
amazing,
easy.
isn't it?
Not easy.
No, I can imagine it's also very difficult because it's just you're concentrating on what you're doing, but then also you need to have eyes in the back of your head to make sure that you're capturing what's happening, but then also making sure that you're not messing up. It's very
Anticipating, remembering the dialogue, following the dialogue between the actors. I mean, obviously, we try and have more booms on the floor if there are more actors, but still, there are limits. A friend and colleague of mine, Simon Hayes, was showing a post yesterday of a scene that he did in Wicked for Good, and he had 3 booms on the 3 actors on the floor, and he said, that it's unusual to get three boom operators on the floor. It's and really that's a shame.
I can imagine as well having 3 boom operators there is like I can maybe have like a jousting session as well to be like who's going to get in what area and who's getting on whose turf.
See, you're all given your actor to stay with, so it's kind of like there shouldn't really be. And I suppose it all depends on the action, really. If there's a lot of crossing of actors, there might be switching, which is quite. And then I've got to keep on top of that at my end. But that's the job.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's good, and it's like it's different because I've had sound mixers and sound designers. Yeah, so and they've been quite complimentary about production sound and how you guys go out and do certain things. So if you're on location, for example, which we see in both films, you do some sort of like temp tracks as well of areas of what it might sound like. So I guess with the Tongue Twister film and Anemone, you're in that forest environment and then also in a hut, so you kind of need to get the right you want to get the sound of the temp sound of what that room is like on whichever day you're filming as well.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, yes. We're always trying to get the dialogue as clean as possible, and the environment that we're in can make that very challenging to do. The weather, for example, on Anemone was quite dynamic, to say the least. We were filming mainly on an island, Anglesey in Wales, North Wales, and the weather, it was one of those 4 seasons in one day sort of places. So it would be sunny, it would rain, it would be blowing a gale, it would be, everything would happen, one thing after another. So nightmare for continuity of everything. And filming in sand dunes and so on and so forth. It was and because it was such a not a huge cast and very sort of emotional piece, lots of quiet moments and so on. So you really could hear a lot of background stuff that was going on. There was nowhere to hide in that film. When you contrast that with something like Steve, where you have 20, 30 people all mic'd up with dialogue, but also in being encouraged to improvise around that dialogue. So you never really knew what was going to happen and when it was going to happen. And the director, he absolutely loved to play tricks on the actors. So he would have a scene where we would be, and the only people that would find out about this thing that was going to happen would be us, because he'd tell us so that we could have people mic'd up beforehand and what have you. But he'd get them to do a scene and he'd be happy with how it was going and he'd have got it covered. And then he would add an additional actor or several actors to try to throw the main actors off to see what happens if you send someone in who starts doing something in the background which is really disruptive. And he would do that all the time. So you just never, it was always quite crazy things going on. But weirdly, that amount of chaos and noise meant it was actually, the background noise was less of an issue, because you could hear it with people shouting and screaming and fighting and so on and so forth. So there were very different beasts, and one was all about precision and accuracy and trying to get the best out of a situation. And also, in the case of Anemone, I've said it right a few times now, I had already had quite a good and relationship with the with post supervisor Steve on that, and we'd spoken before we started shooting, which is really unusual, because normally the sound post supervisor will be engaged after I've finished working or during that period, but it's rare that they're taken on. He was actually engaged before I was, so we were able to speak from the word go and come up with a plan for all those spaces where there isn't a great deal of dialogue, where it's about performance and what have you. He was able to say, okay, I'd like you to try and get this for me, or I'd like to, and also Ronan, the director as well, had also said right from the very start to think of the weather as another character in the film that was going to play a big role in post-production, so that we went out of our way to do additional recordings on that in order to facilitate that, which we would normally we're trying to avoid those extra noises as much as possible. But in the case of Anemone, we were actually asked to get them, so we got them as a sort of separate wild tracks and what have you, and focused a lot on getting all those minute details that end up making the film what it is.
I think it's interesting as well to hear this, how somebody could, the post sound team coming on before yourself, but then also those discussions, because I guess for them it probably makes them feel much more comfortable knowing that production sound, you're all on the same page, but then also that if you are going to go out and get some extra things, especially with something like an enemy, and oh my gosh,
you got it.
An enemy, where you are, very much environmentally driven sort of film, because you're out in the middle of nowhere, and I guess you can also pick up certain things that you might not necessarily might think of. So like if you mentioned 4 seasons in one day, if it's too hot, birds might not be out, or insects might not be around because it's too hot for them to come out. But once it rains and cools down, all of a sudden you start hearing robins and
that was going on. Actually, we were getting a lot of changes of noise, and obviously some bits in forest and some by the sea, and you've got the difference in the fauna and so on. That really was something that happened. Yeah, trying to sort of manage continually changing background noise. There's a very emotional scene on a beach in sand dunes where, and it started off in the morning, it was pouring with rain, and we had a piece of polystyrene up over the actors to try to protect them a little bit. You could hear the rain hitting the polystyrene. There was wind blowing through the dunes. It was getting in their actors' eyes and so on. We were also there's a military base near there as well, so there were fighter jets going over as well. And something about Daniel Day-Lewis and the way that he acts, I think he calls it immersion, but everything that happens, so he's in the zone, and he's become the person that he's playing. So we never ever called him Daniel, or I guess we never met Daniel really. We always met Ray, the bloke from Sheffield who's in the story, with a very convincing, I am from Sheffield, and it's set in the 90s, and I remember being, sort of back in the 90s, some friends of my dad's about that sort of age, speaking with that accent and using those colloquialisms and so on, and he absolutely nailed the accent. It was really quite something. anyway, so he's always in that zone, and he's always being Ray. So when anything happens, it's one of the reasons, I guess, why he needs to have it's the set's unusually quiet. There's a lot of respect paid to letting him get to the place he needs to be, and you don't always get that, and sets can be quite noisy places, and literally if every other department are doing their job properly, that's a problem for me, because they're nearly all making a noise of some kind, one way or another, special effects or lighting department, whatever. Everything makes noise, generators, everything makes a noise. All is a problem for us. So he needs to have it as quiet as possible, because anything that he hears or sees, he reacts to in character. And so anytime a plane went over, he built that into his performance effectively. He would acknowledge a plane going over, rather than just ignoring it and continuing with the dialogue as other actors might do. So I really sort of understood why he needed it to be the way he needed it, because it changed the performance. Anything that happened changed his performance, and I thought that was quite an interesting thing about the way he gets to where he needs to be.
When you have something like that, how do you still just go about with your job and continue recording? Because I can imagine with other performers, plane goes by or something sort of like puts them off, they'll just have to sort of go back to a certain line or start again. And if that's built into their performance, it's actually quite, I wouldn't say interesting, it's more just sort of fascinating as an actor and a performer to see the reaction of if a twig snapped because you heard something, or as you said, the plane as well.
The joy, I mean, because Anemone was a small cast, and the way that you get coverage on a film normally, each actor has to have their close up and so on and so forth, close ups, and because it was mainly always two-handers, it meant there was a lot of time to get coverage and get good coverage at lots of different sizes, and I think in the case of Daniel's character, or when Daniel was playing that character, he every time it was a different performance. And one of the things I was interested in seeing, and when I eventually saw the film for the cast and crew screening, was what choices they'd made in the edit to go with, because there were so many different directions you could go in, because he would always give you a different interpretation each time he had a go, and there were lots of goes, because that's how he likes to operate, and that's how Ronan likes to operate. And so there's lots of coverage and lots of options, and for us it was about making sure that whatever's happening, we've just got we did do the having a boom on every actor and following everything that happened as close as humanly possible, and yet keeping out of shot and planting things and so on and so forth. And so with that one, it was about having the luxury for us was that we knew we were going to get lots of coverage, and we knew that there would be lots of goes and chances to get a really wonderful piece of performance. And you can always, if there's a plane going over at one point and he's reacting to it, then that's fine, because he's reacting to it, so you can have the sound of the plane in there. It's if he doesn't react to it and the plane goes over, that's where we can't have because no normal person would do that. No normal person would not react to that noise. So in many ways it was useful the way he did it, and also because he's playing a retired soldier in the story, he would have a connection to sort of military hardware, which also kind of made sense to me as well. So I found it quite useful and helpful how he likes to work and how Ronan likes to direct. It worked for us.
I guess as well, when you get that, how somebody wants to work and how they're gonna direct or act, probably makes your job easier, because then you can focus on, especially on this sort of film where it's very dialogue heavy and quite long monologues, and you want to make sure that each take is basically perfect. And again, if they're reacting to the sound of a plane or something happening, it probably helps you when you do your post notes to say, yep, plane goes by, but can hear it on 32 seconds, but you can still use it, and it's not like the
there's
dialogue
only
editor.
that one bit. But also I always also have another mic as well that's recording background noise. I call it a Sync Atmos mic. So we also have a clean and recording of that environmental noise that's going on, that's away from the dialogue, so it's clean as a whistle, but has plane noise and birds and sea and wind and all that. So your dialogue editor has got that track that they can defer to if they need to cut between two scenes where, you know, the two takes where on one take there was a plane, on the second take there isn't, and then you've got the sudden change in background noise. You can use that Sync Atmos that we've got recorded there to smooth out the edit, because what you really what you respond to, what your ear responds to, isn't so much the amount of background noise there is. I mean, by the time you watch the film in the cinema, they've added so many layers of audio on top of the dialogue. It's, you know, it's incredible. There's huge amounts of stuff going on. It's about sudden changes. You notice sudden and abrupt changes. So if you can make a nice smooth transition from noisy to not noisy, then your ear really doesn't get attracted by it. And of course, in the film, in an anemone, got it wrong myself there. Anemone, they do play a lot with the dynamics of the sound. So Steve Flanagan did use it as a tool, sort of going to, in order to make things seem louder or quieter, going from extremely loud to extremely quiet. There are these big jumps in the background which are used in a sort of artistic way, rather than, obviously not a mistake. They were deliberate, but that's the same as your ear notices sudden changes. You can use that constructively if you want to as well, and he certainly did.
And do you find that, like, when somebody uses their ear, do you feel like it's like a moment where you know that your work is like top notch, so that they're just going by sort of ear tone and pitch and how certain things are happening, and then you know that they're just, they're working kind of like freestyle, but they trust your work to be like that good?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, in the case of anemone, we definitely all, I mean, as I said, I'd spoken to Steve Flanagan before, and we'd got a good, we trusted each other, and we all knew what we were going, we knew exactly what to expect and what we were trying to achieve. And even another unusual thing that happened because of that relationship starting so early was we were able to get Steve to send us sounds that we could play on set, which is something I don't normally do, but we were able to play. There's a quite sort of crucial scene. There's a storm. I'll not say too much about it in case people haven't seen it, but there's a big storm, and it has a very distinctive sound because of the type of storm it is. And I wanted to play that sound into one of the environments the actors were going to be in, and it be a surprise, so they didn't know it was coming. And Steve made this sound effect, or sound effects, that we could play in this moment, and we used it. And so the first time the actors run into this space, you hear this noise, and their reaction was a genuine reaction to this incredible noise that was going on, which is something that normally doesn't happen. And that was very much thanks to Steve and him being able to come up with something for us beforehand. Normally that all happened so far after production. So we were able to get sounds from him. Look, we tried to create a little sort of bubble of sound, as well as all the other departments doing their best to put Daniel's character in and Sean's character in this little world in the mid-90s. So like the sounds that you might hear in the 90s, I don't know, mobile phone rings, for example. They had a very distinctive tone in those days, and so everything we tried to play those sounds in there if it wasn't going to interfere with dialogue, to give them this sense of being in this point in time, which is a really, I mean, I don't normally work like that, but it was a really nice thing to do, and thoroughly enjoyed being able to sort of have the time and the freedom to do that. Ronan, the director, was really very supportive of doing things slightly differently and trying things out in order to get the actors to where they needed to be. If he didn't necessarily, he always knew what he wanted, but he didn't necessarily know how to get it. But he trusted the heads of department to give him advice on how to get there. And yeah, it's that was quite a liberating and freeing sort of environment to be working in.
Yeah, and I guess when you have someone like that, when you are able to talk to people, you have an idea, but you don't, you know, the sort of destination, but you don't know the journey, and getting everybody's advice. And I think that's the whole point of filmmaking, is to sort of all work in tandem and get there. And you can also probably teach people how you do your stuff, or how to sort of necessarily do shortcuts, but create like a shorthand to get there. And even when you're mentioning about having pre-made sound design for the Storm and having that played, that must have felt slightly. It probably goes against it does go against one of your rules, but then also probably a nice surprise, because you can then have the actors focus on like the brutality of what's happening, and have that capture it, and then maybe then you can capture the bits where they're trying to catch their breath, or because they're running, maybe hear more of the fear in what's going on.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, we've got to remember that whatever our rules are for the way we like to operate, ultimately it's a multimedia format, and we're all trying to help each other out to get the best out of the performance, and whatever it takes to get the best location performance that we possibly can from the actors. If that means we need to do this, then we'll do it, you know. And knowing, like I said, knowing that we're going to get coverage later, so that we can rely on if I lose, if the first take has this incredible noise over it, so we lose some breaths or something like that, I think that's it's worthwhile giving up those breaths at that point to capture this amazing performance of them reacting genuinely to a situation, you know, that's terrifying, that they weren't expecting. And then later we can, when it's no longer going to be a surprise to them, we can not use it, and then they can, you know, then we'll get the breaths and so on and so forth. And also those sorts of things are also covered in post if necessary, although it was clear from the word go that Daniel doesn't like to do any ADR recording, doesn't like recording dialogue afterwards. He will do it, but he'd rather not. And I think most actors would rather not. But quite often the situation is that, you know, whatever's happening on location, something will interfere with the performance, some background noise that is out of your control. Or sometimes it's because there's part of the story can't really be understood, so you can use a little bit of ADR dialogue to help sell the story to the viewer. There's lots of reasons why you might want to do it, but on Anemone, we didn't need to do any ADR with Daniel at all. So hopefully he'll remember that. One of the things I was going to say as well, in regard to your previous question, was just, I think our job as heads of department is to sort of, you know, the director's the one with the vision, and they've got they have a creative vision, and they know what they want to achieve, but they don't always have the dialogue they're not experts in every department. They're experts in their own department, and so our job is to facilitate them getting what they want, what they're imagining. And, you know, if I particularly enjoy a situation where the director does trust you to have their backs on that, and to be able to just let you, after they've explained to you what they want in their own terms, you can then go and achieve that for them. And the route to that might not be very, very clear to them, but they trust you enough to let you experiment to get there. And in the case with Ronan, he was absolutely, that's exactly how he likes to operate. He tells you very, he tells you exactly what he wants, and paints a very sort of clear picture in his own language, and then you take that and you make that happen. And that, I think, that is really what we're supposed to be doing for directors. We should be achieving what they want, them being an auteur in as much as they're controlling the actor and the environment and so on and so forth, but how that is achieved, trusting their heads of department to be able to help to achieve that for them.
Yeah, and also if somebody's if it's a sort of feature debut or it's their 20th film, they're always going to need to sort of reach out to heads departments and work with them and explain your vision. And I know you guys are there to serve it, but then it's also, how do we make it as easy and less stressful for them as possible as well?
Yeah. I think for me, by the time we get on the floor and we're shooting, the director shouldn't really need to be talking to me a great deal, and I shouldn't be interrupting them very much. By that point, we should all have been well enough briefed and understand our jobs and what we're doing, that we can keep out of each other's way. They can focus on actors and performance, and the other more what we're doing, a technical job, and it's quite clear what we need to do and how we, and what the outcome is. How to get there might not be clear, but the outcome is clear. So we should be focusing on that and taking that concern away from a director, because it's quite easy, and I see that with some directors, where they can get caught up in all of the other minutiae of things that are going on with other departments around them, and that's the opposite of what you want. You want them to be able to just fully focus on actors' performance and the way it looks, and so on. And those sorts of things are what they should be concerned about. They shouldn't be worrying about whether a piece of dialogue is going to be quite, or whether you can quite hear this or that. That's something that I don't want them to have to worry about.
Yeah, which is fair enough. There's, just going back to Steve,
Yes,
because there's a bit where you mentioned about the director would give you a heads up about the trick that he's going to play and how he's going to get his actors to react. I'm correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that you might need to mic up a few more extra people, but then also change the way that you might be positioned in terms of where the boom would be and where your team might be as well. How do you go about sort of communicating with that, your team, without sort of startling the actors to think that, like, oh, what's going on? That I'm being mic'd up. This is different. To not sort of give away what the director wants.
Yeah. So in the case, I'll give you an example. There's a scene in Steve where a fire alarm goes off, and then Steve walks down the aisle of the school with his fingers in his ears, and all the kids are around him going crazy. Only a few of the actors knew. So obviously the actors who are going to be doing that and making that happen know it's going to happen. And so we're able to take people off. We have places for miking people up and so on and so forth. And all of the actors have their own trailers as well. So, it's quite easy to contain it all. I can speak to my team. I have private comms to them. So they're all wearing headphones. We have walkie-talkies as well. So we can talk backwards and forwards to each other very privately and quietly, and not interrupt anyone else. And so the director had come to me and said, I'm going to get these 3 guys who are not in this scene. They were there. He said, and we need to mic them up, and they're going to set the fire alarm off, and then everyone else is we'll just see what happens, you know. And so we're in this classroom, and these 3 boys set the fire alarm off, and the other boys just start jumping around like wow, and jumping in Killian's face and like screaming on it. Oh, and he like calmly gets up and just walks down this corridor. And it was a long shot. So we did have to set up antenna in places where that, you know, if anyone had been paying attention, they might have said, oh, why are they putting the aerials there? But to be honest with you, all the actors are quite focused on what they're doing, and not really worrying too much about why sound people are moving aerials around quite considerably. But we did have to adjust our setup in order to achieve to get range on all of those, because there was in that scene there's 20 something people mic'd up, and then booms and plant mics and all sorts of stuff, and we did need to make sure that we could cover the entire area and that the signal wouldn't drop out at some point, because they're walking down long concrete corridors, and that's not great for radio signals. They don't go through concrete walls that well. So we had to plant things, and obviously everything needs to be planted out of shot. And you can't be 100% sure what will be in shot, because no one really knows what's coming up. So you have to sort of be super safe and work out how you're going to do it. And then there's a certain amount of being fairly sure about what's going to work and what isn't going to work. But yeah, we set it all up and we did it. And it was one of those things. We'd completed the day's shooting early, so we had about an hour to kill at the end of the day. And that's why the director came up with that. He said, I'm going to set this up and do that. So we had a little bit of time to prep. But the first time it happens, we did it multiple times, but the first time it happens was completely natural and unexpected in terms of none of the actors, apart from the 3 guys that pulled the alarm, knew it was going to happen. And we were able to keep it secret. The director was also very clear that he didn't want anyone to know either. He didn't want the other departments to know. So it literally is that need to know basis, and we managed to contain all of that. Yeah, I mean, Steve was a very different film in terms of it was that was all about managing large groups of people and being prepared for improvisations where it could go from anything to someone bursting into tears to someone having a fight, and it being safe and but capturing the sound, capturing the quiet bits, but also being able to capture the screams and the shouts and not having any distortion. Yeah, that was and of all these people and this deluge of sound, it was I'd drive home some evenings with my ears ringing.
When you do have something like that where there is so much going on in terms of people arguing, fighting, or crying, or changing things around, how do you go about working with the sound levels? Because you don't want things to peak so it ruins the take, but then also you need to be like mentally prepared for something to happen. Or do you just preset it in a way that it will be just about loud enough that they can play around with it in post?
It's the latter, yes. So we always err on the side of caution. The mics that I was using on that, I just bought some new Wizicom mics, which you could change the settings on the mic using an app, using Bluetooth. So we were able to, so without interfering too much with the actors, so they knew something was going on, we could remotely adjust levels on their mics. We could also put their mics into a record mode as well, so the mic would record itself should we be worried that they might go too far and go out of range. And the signal to noise ratio on the mic when it's recording internally is greater than it is when it's sending wirelessly. So that was our sort of fallback, was that we could pop things into record if we had long enough. But there's quite a lot of things that have to happen there, though, because you've got to set the time code on all the recording radio mics as well. And there's a lot of bits and bobs. So you've got to have a well-oiled. Your department needs to be very much on side and know exactly what to do in what order, in order to make it work. But yeah, generally speaking, with recording, and when you've got such the equipment's fantastic. You know, I use sound devices for my recording and Wizicom for my radio mics. The latitude in those systems is pretty good. So I always err on the side of caution. So it's always quieter than it is too loud. And then you know, knowing that the system's quiet enough, and if you've got your gain structure correct and optimized from beginning to end, then you'll have a lot of latitude at the end. But if you have your gain structure wrong at the beginning, then you will get problems further down the line. But yeah, so we're always able to give post what they needed. And sometimes it can be also having more booms there, you know, some set at different levels. So some are set for a louder performance, and some might be set for a quieter performance. And so knowing that you might lose the top end of that one might get a bit compressed, but you'll have it there. And so, you know, trying to sort of balance that out as well. That's another approach that was definitely used in that scene.
Cool. Again, interesting. There's so many sort of moving parts that you need to figure out and plan out as well. And it's not just as simple as just plopping your stuff down and getting to work.
Pressing record and pushing faders up there.
take a sip of your coffee.
A lot of planning and reacting as well. So obviously, the more of the heads up that you can be given, the better. But also, it is really very exciting when unexpected things happen, and you do have to be prepared to change everything and react. We like to be as prepared as possible, but part of that is being in a position to react to things you weren't expecting. And yes, a film like Steve was very exciting, and there was never a dull moment on that film.
Well, if they're playing tricks on one another, then yeah, I can imagine there's going to be a lot of shenanigans and trying to get the most out of people and seeing how they're going to react as actors and trying to get the most organic take.
Tim, the director, did say to me, I think it was at the end of week 1, he said he was going to have an impossible challenge for me every day. And I in fact, he probably said that to me on the 3rd day of filming, because I remember at the end of the week, we got to the end of the week, and he said, I give you an impossible challenge, and so far you've managed to get it, but I'm going to try and catch you out. I'm going to keep challenging you every day. And yeah, certainly the first 2 weeks, he would throw something absolutely ludicrous at us, but we always managed to get it.
Did he ever catch you out?
He didn't. I'm pleased to say he never managed to catch us out. Tim, if you're listening, you never managed it.
You need to try harder, Tim. Come on. I just want to sort of wrap up with the episode with my final question. What was probably what was your favorite / hardest scene to work on both films?
The hardest, in the case of Anemone, the hardest scene was the scene on the beach in the sand dunes, because that was a fairly quiet performance, and that was the day when we had every kind of weather, and trying to get some consistency across all these different environmental changes was a very difficult thing to achieve. But when it started working, and you thought, oh my God, it's happening, it's happening, and Daniel's performance was so powerful. It did really make the hair stand up on your arms, that one. And I did feel at the end of it that we'd earned our money that day. And in the case of Steve, probably the first day of filming was one of the most challenging, and so was one of the most challenging on that shoot, but also probably the most challenging first day I've ever had, because ordinarily when you're filming, they schedule it so that the first day of filming is a relatively easy day, So because everyone's getting to know everyone, and it's there are lots of technical things that need ironing out, that you've had a bit of prep and what have you, but things are always different when you're actually in the heat of battle, as it were. So that first day is normally a fairly quiet, fairly easy day so you can get through. But on Steve, the first day was the enormous scene where he drives up to the school, gets out of his car, and then meets some people who are there to film him that he's forgotten about. And then he goes into the school and he basically walks around the ground floor of the school, which is all very thick. It's a really old building, thick walls, hard to get range. Again, it was a 360-degree Steadicam shot that changed every time. And then there was lots of improvisation. Plus, there was 6.5 pages of dialogue that had to be captured, plus all the extra improvisation as well. And that was day one. And that was oh wow, this is an ambitious day one. But yeah, they had scheduled 2 days for us to shoot that scene, and we did end up completing it with about 2 hours to spare on day one.
Oh wow!
So day two was a I wouldn't say it was a day for free, but we got by the end of the first day we were ahead of schedule, which never happens on a really complicated scene. So that was enormously fun. But yeah, it was a bit. I mean, I must confess to having a sleepless night the night before.
But then again, if you got the hardest bit out of the way first, then you kind of just everything should
all
technically be a
downhill from
breeze.
there.
Yeah, technically should be a breeze.
That's what we thought. But then Tim had his "I'm going to do something impossible every day" rule as well. So yeah, we thought it would all be downhill, but it turned out it was a lot more cross country than it looked on paper.
And then that's what his test was for each day.
Indeed.
Secretly he's playing 4D chess with you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Stevie, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Anemone and is out now, and Steve is streaming now on Netflix. Go out and listen to Stevie and his team's great work. Thank you again, Stevie.
Nice one. Thank you very much. See you later. Cheers, Robert. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.